Have you ever been told to pack your bags, right after burying your only child? My name's Marlene Givens, and the day after my son's funeral, my daughter-in-law asked me to leave the home I helped build. No warning. No softness. Just silence and boxes. But here's the thing, I didn't leave. At least, not the way she expected. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear from you. I remember that Friday afternoon so clearly. The sky was a calm, clean blue, the kind that almost dares you to feel hopeful. But inside me, something had gone permanently quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from a lack of noise, but from the absence of something you thought would always be there. The funeral had ended just a few hours earlier. Most people had left by now, the neighbors, Graham's co-workers, even the pastor who gave a kind but distant eulogy. The living room still smelled faintly of lilies and the cheap punch from the reception table. The photo of Graham, framed in oak, sat crooked on the mantel above the cold fireplace. I couldn't bring myself to straighten it. I was sitting alone on the couch, still in my black dress, shoes kicked off somewhere near the front door. My ankles ached, but I didn't move. I was staring at the spot where he used to sit, where he'd leave his phone charging and his coffee half finished. And then I heard her heels. Click, click, click. Delia never walked softly, not even in mourning. She came into the room holding her leather bag, the one she always carried when something needed handling. She stood for a moment by the entryway, like she was rehearsing something in her head. Then she spoke. I was hoping we could talk for a minute. I looked up but didn't say anything. Her voice was smooth, even, just like always. Practiced. She sat down across from me, crossing her legs slowly. This has been a hard week for both of us, she said. And I know we're still processing everything. I nodded slightly. The silence between us stretched, not uncomfortable, just dry and familiar. Delia took a breath. I think it's time we start looking at what's next. For both of us. I blinked. What do you mean? She shifted, just a little. I've been thinking. With Graham gone, I need space. I need time to rebuild things. And I believe it would be best, for everyone, if you found somewhere else to live. There it was. Not shouted, not cruel. Just, cleanly delivered. A quiet incision. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I think my heart skipped a beat, but my body stayed still. I see, I said. She looked at me, maybe waiting for an argument. Maybe she'd already planned out her responses, whatever they might be. But I didn't give her one. She stood up and added, almost like an afterthought, of course, there's no rush. But, sooner would be easier. Then she was gone, out of the room, back into her quiet, curated grief. I sat there for a long time after. Maybe an hour. Maybe just a few minutes. Everything felt like it was dissolving into one gray blur. It wasn't that I was surprised. Delia and I had never been close. She was polite, careful, and always a little too controlled around me. We'd shared this house for almost 9 years, but never truly shared a life. I kept trying, though. I always thought, for Graham's sake, that we'd eventually find a rhythm. That time would do its slow magic. But time, it turned out, could run out before it healed anything. I thought about the little things. The night I cooked a pot roast for her birthday, she barely touched it and didn't even notice I'd used her mother's recipe. The Christmas morning she said she was too tired to come down for breakfast. Or the way she always called me Marlene instead of Mom, even after the wedding. But I swallowed it all. For Graham. For peace. For the image of a family I didn't want to lose. That night, after Delia had gone to bed, I walked slowly to my room. It felt smaller somehow, like the walls had inched in. I sat down at the old writing desk I hadn't used in years and pulled open the bottom drawer. I knew what I was looking for. There it was, a thick manila envelope, slightly worn at the corners. The label on the front was written in Graham's careful print. Closing documents, Willow Lane House. I held it in my lap, staring at it for a long while before setting it down. Before I reached for my suitcase, before I packed a single thing, I called Graham's old attorney. Some memories I'd chosen to forget. But not this time. The house started to shift almost immediately after the funeral. Not in structure, of course, same creaky stairs, same front porch with the chipped paint I kept meaning to fix. But the feeling of it. The air felt thinner. The colors dimmed. Everything started to look like it belonged to someone else. Delia moved quickly, as if grief gave her a deadline. She boxed up Graham's books from the den the morning after the service. Didn't ask, didn't mention it. Just had the boxes stacked by the door with a note that said donate. I stood there for a while just staring at them. He'd loved those books. Annotated most of them in pencil, tiny thoughts tucked in the margins. I didn't say a word. Just walked past and poured myself a cup of coffee, even though it tasted like cardboard without him around. She changed the photos on the hallway wall next. Took down the ones with me and Graham at his graduation, the one of the three of us at Crater Lake a few summers back. Replaced them with newer pictures, Graham and Delia smiling stiffly at company events, or selfies from wine tastings I'd never been invited to. One night I noticed she'd replaced the doormat. Used to say home is where the coffee is. Now it just said welcome. Plain. Impersonal. I told myself it was just her way of coping. People grieve differently. But in my gut, I knew this wasn't about grief. It was about claiming space. Making it hers. Erasing the bits that reminded her of me. Still, I didn't say anything. I kept wiping the counters, folding laundry, feeding the dog. I thought, if I just kept being quiet, kept out of her way, maybe things would settle. Graham once said, "Mom, treat this house like it's yours, too." He'd just closed on it, still excited, still naive. I laughed and told him I didn't need much. But that sentence stuck with me. For 9 years, I clung to it like it was written in ink, not air. That afternoon, a few days after the service, Nora stopped by. She was carrying a loaf of banana bread wrapped in a faded tea towel. She'd lived 2 houses down for nearly 20 years, ever since her divorce. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her for her blunt advice and unreadable facial expressions. She didn't knock, just opened the screen door like she always had. "You eaten anything today?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not really." "Good," she said, setting the loaf on the counter. "Then I won't feel bad pushing carbs on you." We ended up sitting on the front porch. The sky was heavy with that Oregon gray, the kind that threatened rain but never delivered. The hanging ferns swayed in a lazy breeze. I told her what Delia said. About leaving. About needing space. Nora didn't interrupt. She just nodded once, slowly, her lips pressed in a firm line. When I finished, she looked out at the street and said, "My ex-husband kicked me out of our house 4 days after he filed the divorce. You know what the worst part was? It was my name on half the damn mortgage." I looked at her. "What did you do?" "I stopped being polite," she said. "Hired a lawyer. Slept better the next night than I had in years." I gave her a small laugh, more exhale than amusement. She turned to face me. "Marlene, do you know if your name's on any of the house paperwork?" "I don't think so. I gave Graham some money for the down payment. I never asked him about the details. I trusted him." "That's not a crime," she said. But trusting someone doesn't mean you forfeit your rights. I looked down at my hands, thumb rubbing the edge of my thumbnail. I never thought I'd have to fight for a place I've cleaned, cooked in, cried in. It never felt like mine. But it felt like home. Nora stood up and brushed imaginary crumbs from her jeans. Just promise me one thing, she said. Before you pack a single box, go through your papers. Find proof of what you gave. If Delia wants you out, she can't do it on a handshake and a tight smile. After she left, I sat on the porch for a long time. The house behind me looked quiet, still. But something in my chest was moving, something slow and steady that felt a lot like rising. Maybe it was just the banana bread. Or maybe it was the first crack in the silence I'd built around myself. The first time Delia asked me to leave, it sounded like a suggestion, gentle, diplomatic, something to think about. But by the end of that week, the tone had shifted. She was no longer asking. She was scheduling. Just wanted to remind you, she said over breakfast one morning, her voice smooth like always, but sharper at the edges. If we could aim for next weekend, that'd give me time to start sorting the guest room and meet with the realtor. She said it while pouring herself a glass of orange juice. Like it was logistics, not a life unraveling. I looked at her across the kitchen island. Next weekend, I repeated quietly. I figured that'd be fair, she added. It's not like we didn't see this coming. I didn't answer. The spoon in my hand clinked against the bowl, a little too loud in the quiet kitchen. She took a slow sip and offered, I'm sorry if the timing feels sudden. But Graham's gone, and I have to rebuild. We both do. That word, rebuild, rang in my ears long after she left for work. She made it sound noble, like she was rising from rubble. But I was standing in the same ashes, and no one had handed me blueprints. To anyone else, what she said probably made sense. Reasonable. Practical. If I told someone at church or the post office, I could already hear the responses, well, it was her husband. You'll be fine, Marlene, you're strong. Maybe it's time to move on. But it wasn't the words. It was the way she said them. Like I was a package on the porch someone forgot to bring inside. Like I was a loose end she needed to tie up before starting her next chapter. That night, I walked past her office on my way to get laundry. She didn't hear me, her door was cracked open, and her voice was low but clear. I can show the place as soon as the paperwork's lined up, she was saying. Yeah, I know it's fast, but I need to move before fall hits. I don't want to get stuck waiting around. A pause. No, she doesn't know yet. I'll handle it. I stood there, frozen. My hands went numb around the laundry basket. So that's what this was. Not grief. Not space. It was a sale. A plan. A way to get free of me the same way she'd gotten free of him. And I was just another leftover. Back in my room, I sat on the floor and pulled out the plastic storage bin I kept tucked under the bed. Inside were old utility bills, receipts, some birthday cards Graham had given me over the years. I started sorting through the folders, half out of instinct, half out of something closer to fury. Then I found it. A single sheet of paper. A wire transfer confirmation. $48,000. From Marlene Givens. To Graham Givens. Memo, house down payment, Willow Lane. I held it like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. The numbers were clear, the date was 8 years ago. The bank's logo still visible in the corner. I dug deeper, heart pounding. There it was, the closing packet for the house. All in Graham's name. But this transfer, was proof. My proof. For a long time, I just sat there, the papers spread out around me like a map I didn't know how to read. I wasn't sure what it meant legally. I wasn't a lawyer. But I knew one thing, I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined my part in this. I hadn't clung to a false sense of belonging. I had helped build this roof over our heads. And still, the question burned at the edges of my thoughts. Did it matter? Did any of it matter to someone like Delia? Someone who could smile through a sentence like, "I need you out"? Someone who thought timing her grief was the same as honoring it? I thought of Graham again. The last real conversation we had before his accident. He'd asked me if I needed anything, just out of the blue. "Mom, I mean it," he said. "Don't ever let Delia steamroll you. This house is yours, too." At the time, I laughed. I told him he was being dramatic. Now, I wasn't so sure. The more I sat with the papers, the less I could pretend that this was just a misunderstanding. This wasn't about grief. This was about power. About space. About deciding who belonged and who didn't. I put the wire transfer in a separate folder, closed the bin, and slid it back under the bed. It took me 3 days to make the call. I stared at the number scrawled in Graham's handwriting on the back of a business card, tucked in the same envelope as the house documents. Darren Kessler. His attorney. I'd met him once at a barbecue, years ago. Seemed like the kind of man who wore loafers without socks and said things like, "Let's circle back." But Graham trusted him, and right now, that was more than enough. The receptionist told me Darren had a slot the next morning. I showed up early. Too early, actually. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before even stepping into the building. His office was in a strip of converted townhomes in downtown Eugene, not far from the bookstore where I used to take Graham when he was little. I remember thinking how odd it was, sitting in a lawyer's waiting room while the scent of fresh muffins from the bakery next door seeped through the walls. Life, apparently, didn't care about grief. Or timing. Darren remembered me right away. "Mrs. Givens," he said warmly, reaching across the desk. "I'm sorry we're meeting again like this." I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. His office was too clean. Too bright. "I wanted to ask you something about the house," I finally said, setting the folder on his desk. "And about Graham's will." He opened the file, adjusted his glasses, and took his time reading through the wire transfer. "This matches the record I have," he said. "You contributed a substantial down payment. Graham always made that clear." He tapped a finger on the top sheet. "Originally, his will split assets between you and Delia. But..." I didn't like that pause. "But what?" Darren hesitated. "I was notified a few weeks ago, shortly after his death, that there was a new will submitted. It names Delia as the sole beneficiary." The room went quiet. "I never heard about any new will," I said slowly. "He would have told me. Graham never hid things from me, not things like that." Darren gave a small, apologetic shrug. "All I can tell you is, the new will wasn't filed through our office. It came through a different firm. No witnesses listed, just a notary. Which doesn't mean it's invalid, but it does raise questions." I stared at the desk. At the folder. At my own hands resting on my lap. Could someone fake something like that? I asked. "It's happened before," he said carefully. "I'm not saying that's what this is, but if you feel unsure, if you believe this isn't what Graham wanted, it's worth reviewing." I left his office with the folder clutched to my chest like it might slip through my fingers. Outside, the sky had turned slate gray, heavy with rain. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. Back home, Delia was in the kitchen unpacking groceries. I must have left the front door too loud behind me, because she turned fast, like she was expecting bad news. "You went to see Darren?" she asked. I hadn't even taken off my coat. "I did." She set a box of cereal down a little too hard. You could have just asked me directly. But I guess that's not your style. I stayed quiet. She took a step closer. I can't believe you'd go behind my back like that. Are you trying to ruin what little piece I've managed to keep together? What, you think I'm stealing from you now? Her voice was rising. I still didn't say anything. You want to take me to court, she snapped. Is that what this is? You want a legal battle while we're both still grieving. I looked at her then. Really looked. For the first time, I didn't see the woman who had married my son. I saw someone protecting something, and it wasn't love. It was ownership. Territory. I'm not trying to ruin anything, I said quietly. I'm just trying not to disappear. She scoffed and turned away, grabbing a dish towel like she needed something to hold. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind rattled the windows and I pulled the old quilt tighter around my shoulders. I sat at my desk, same one where Graham used to do his homework, and opened a fresh page in my notebook. If I leave, I wrote, I lose everything quietly, and no one will know what was taken from me. If I stay and fight, I might lose what little remains of the peace between us. Either way, something breaks. I stared at the page for a long time. Then I reached for the phone. Nora answered on the second ring. You awake? I asked. Of course, she said. What's going on? You know any lawyers who aren't afraid of a fight? I said. Preferably ones who don't think women over 60 should be grateful just to have a roof. There was a beat of silence, then her voice softened. I've got just the woman. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I think I'm ready, I said. The law office was nothing like Darren's. Smaller. More modest. A cracked window pane in the reception area let in just enough breeze to rattle a stack of outdated magazines on the table. The whole place smelled faintly of lavender and copier toner. Evie Tran looked like she was barely out of law school, too young to be defending someone like me, too sharp to be underestimated. She had on a forest green blazer and boots that clicked like she meant business. Her eyes, though, were kind. No pity. No performance. Just alert. After reading through the folder I'd brought, my wire transfer, the original will paperwork, the not quite right replacement, she leaned back and took a breath. You have a case, she said, tapping the top page with her pen. But I won't lie to you, Marlene. Going after this won't be gentle. I nodded, even though my hands were shaking slightly in my lap. I tried to hide it by folding them tighter together. You'll be painted as bitter, she continued. Delia's younger, grieving. She'll say you're lashing out. That you're making it all about money. It's not about money, I said. I know, she replied. But it'll be framed that way. Are you ready for that? I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window beside her desk. Across the street was a park where a young couple sat on a bench, their toddler stomping joyfully in a puddle. I wondered what it felt like to live a life that still had decades stretching out in front of it. I think I am, I finally said. I'm not trying to ruin anyone. I just don't want to be erased. Evie nodded. Good. Because what you're doing is about more than real estate. It's about standing up for what's real. Then she slid a manila folder across the desk toward me. You should know this, too, she said. I pulled Graham's old email records from Darren's archive. He wrote to Darren 5 months before he died, asked questions about asset protection, how to make sure you were secure if something happened. I blinked. Did he change the will? I asked. Evie shook her head. Not legally. He never filed anything new. Darren never received a signature. And the updated version Delia submitted? No witnesses. No formal notarization. Frankly, it wouldn't hold up in a serious probate challenge. My throat tightened. So she just made it up. Evie didn't confirm it, not exactly. But her silence was louder than anything she could have said. For a moment, I couldn't move. I stared down at the folder. There was no satisfaction in it. No triumph. Just a deep, dull ache. He tried to protect me, I whispered. He was trying. Evie said nothing. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes. For a split second, I could feel him again, his arms around me in the kitchen that night he'd brought home Chinese takeout, when he noticed how tired I looked and insisted I sit while he cleaned up. I know you always carry the peace in this house, he'd said. But Mom, peace shouldn't cost you everything. I hadn't understood what he meant back then. Now I did. Back home, the house felt colder than usual, even with the heater on. Delia wasn't there, probably staying at a friend's or maybe at the hotel near the lake like she'd done once before during their fights. I sat in the living room, Graham's photo still crooked on the mantel. I didn't straighten it. Instead, I looked around at the walls, the floors, the dent in the armrest of his favorite chair. The smell of his cologne still faint in the hallway closet. Evie had given me the next steps: file an injunction, freeze the title, start the legal motion to contest the will and halt the sale. It would get ugly. I'd be called selfish, petty, disruptive. But none of that scared me anymore. What scared me was the idea that Delia could take this house, strip it down, paint over the memories, and list it for sale like it was just another property on her sheet. Like I had never been here. Like I had never mattered. I walked into the den and sat at the old piano Graham used to bang on when he was 6. I didn't play. I just rested my fingers on the keys. I used to think staying quiet was my way of showing love. That if I held my tongue, the family would stay whole. But the silence had cracked me wide open. I wasn't afraid of being inconvenient anymore. I was afraid of being invisible. That night, I called Evie and told her to move forward. Whatever it took, whatever it cost, I was in. The paperwork was filed on a Tuesday. I remember because it rained that morning, just a steady, cold drizzle, and I had to borrow an umbrella from Nora. It was plaid, the old kind with the wooden handle. She offered it to me at the fence like I was heading off to war. Maybe in a way, I was. I walked into the courthouse with my shoulders back and my breath shallow, like part of me still didn't believe I had the right to be there. As if taking up space in that building was already too much to ask. Evie was calm, razor-focused. She spoke with that quiet confidence that made me feel, if only for a moment, like I wasn't foolish for being there. She filed the motion to freeze the title on the house, and just after noon, we got the word: a temporary injunction was granted. The house couldn't be sold or transferred, not until a judge said otherwise. It was official. It was real. And more importantly, it was public. 2 days later, Delia got served. Right in front of the real estate office on 4th Street, 10 minutes before her meeting with a broker from Albany. I wasn't there to see it, but I imagined the moment, the stiff smile on her face as she shook hands with someone in a blazer, the sudden hand on her shoulder, the white envelope, and the crack in her composure. When I got home that evening, her car was already in the driveway, parked a little too close to the azaleas like she wanted to announce her presence. I opened the front door and didn't even have to step in all the way to feel it, that thick, sour tension sitting in the air like smoke from a burnt pan. She was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You filed against me?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. I set my bag down calmly. "I filed to protect my part of this house." She tossed the envelope on the counter like it had burned her fingers. "This is unbelievable. You've made this into a circus." Graham would be horrified. I let my hands fall to my sides, but my fingers curled in, gently. No, I said, slow and steady. Graham would be horrified that someone was trying to write his mother out of his life. Like I never existed. Her face twisted, like I'd hit something soft. But I didn't stop. You want to pretend this is about grief or starting over? Fine. But don't wrap it in sentiment. This is about control. You're trying to move on, and you don't want anything left behind to remind you he had a mother. She blinked hard. You've always resented me, haven't you? You never wanted me in this house. You never accepted me. That's not true, I said. I tried. I made space. I cooked meals, stayed out of the way, gave you the bedroom with the best light. But it was never enough. I was never soft enough for you. Never small enough. She stepped forward, just a little. You're blowing this up for nothing. You're going to ruin everything we built. My voice was quiet. What exactly did we build, Delia? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the moment Graham died, you started building a future that didn't have me in it. We stood there, two women in a kitchen full of history. The tile beneath our feet had been laid by Graham and his college buddy during a spring break years ago. That room had seen Thanksgiving pies, broken coffee mugs, early morning hugs, late night pacing. And now it felt like a battlefield. Delia didn't say another word. Just turned her face toward the fridge, like it might offer her something she could use. I didn't wait. I walked upstairs and closed my bedroom door with both hands, pressing it shut like I needed the wood to hold me up. Later that evening, the phone rang. I thought about letting it go to voicemail. But I answered. Hi, sweetheart, came the voice, familiar, kind. Joan, from next door. I heard about what's going on, she said gently. I just wanted to tell you, if you need someone to say you've lived there, been part of that house for years, I'll do it. I've seen it with my own eyes. My throat caught. Thank you, I whispered. It was all I could manage. You're not alone, Marlene. Some of us remember. After I hung up, I went and sat by the window. The big maple tree in the yard was bare now, its branches skinny, awkward, but it still stood tall. Graham and I had planted it our first winter here. He'd picked it out himself. The courtroom wasn't as grand as I expected. No mahogany panels or sweeping ceilings, just gray walls, tired carpet, and that faint scent of paper and coffee grounds. Still, it felt heavier than any room I'd ever walked into. Every step toward my seat felt like it echoed with something bigger than just my own story. Evie sat beside me, calm as ever, with a yellow legal pad and 2 pens. I don't think I'd slept more than 4 hours the night before, but I was here. I showed up. That counted for something. The judge, a woman with silver hair pulled into a perfect bun, opened the hearing by asking both parties to summarize. Evie stood, her voice smooth but firm, and laid it all out. We are asking for a temporary injunction to prevent the sale or transfer of the Willow Lane property until questions of ownership and beneficiary intent are fully examined. My client, Mrs. Givens, has contributed financially and has resided in the home for nearly a decade. There is a disputed will and electronic communication from the deceased indicating a desire to protect her interest. She passed a folder to the clerk, bank records, the wire transfer, emails Graham had written. Evie had even highlighted the phrase Graham used in one, I need to make sure my mother's protected if anything ever happens. On Delia's side, her attorney stood and countered. There is no co-ownership agreement. No name on the title. My client is the legal widow and sole heir under the most recent will. Mrs. Givens has no standing to block the sale of a property she never legally owned. I sat there, eyes fixed ahead. I didn't glance at Delia, not until the judge turned to me and said gently, Mrs. Givens, would you like to speak? My knees ached as I stood. My hands were trembling slightly, but I locked them together in front of me. I didn't bring notes. I didn't need them. I'm not here to fight over a house, I said quietly. I'm here because I've already lost my son. And now I'm being asked to lose every trace of him with it. I paused. Let myself breathe. This isn't about money. It's not even about fairness anymore. It's about erasure. About being told, after nearly 10 years under that roof, cooking his meals, folding his shirts, tending that garden, that I don't belong. That I never did. My voice got steadier. I stayed quiet for a long time. Too long. I thought peace was the same as love. That if I didn't stir the water, the family would stay whole. But silence doesn't keep people close. It just gives them permission to leave you behind. I looked up at the judge. Graham never asked me to disappear. He made sure I helped build that home. He told me it was mine, too. I may not be on the deed, but I'm in every corner of that house. Every dent in the floorboard, every flower bed, every holiday dinner. And I'm asking the court not to let my name be swept out like I was never there. There was a long silence when I finished. No one coughed. No one shifted. Just stillness. The judge nodded slowly. I'm granting a temporary injunction, she said. The property cannot be sold or transferred until further review and formal hearing. Both parties will submit additional documentation within 30 days. I let my breath out quietly. Delia didn't speak. She stood, gathered her purse, and left the room without a word. That, more than anything, told me what I needed to know. This time, she had no story to spin. No lines rehearsed. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't even sit down right away. I just took off my shoes, walked into the living room, and began dusting. Not because it needed it, but because it was mine to do. I straightened the photo of Graham above the mantel. Smoothed out the wrinkles in the throw blanket he always used. The sun was coming in low through the blinds, casting a warm stripe across the floor. It's been a month since the hearing. The house is quiet again, but this time, it feels like peace, not exile. The kind of quiet that lets you breathe a little deeper. No suitcases by the door. No whispered deadlines. Just me, the ticking of the kitchen clock, and the slow creak of floorboards that still remember where Graham used to walk. The judge's final decision came by mail. I opened the envelope slowly, sitting at the dining room table with a cup of peppermint tea going cold beside me. The letter confirmed what Evie had already told me in person. The house would be classified as jointly invested property, pending a deeper financial review. I had the right to stay until the matter was fully resolved, and possibly, the right to claim a portion of ownership. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just folded the letter neatly and slid it into the same folder that started this whole thing. That was the only kind of closure I needed, the kind that acknowledged I'd been here. That I mattered. Delia moved out a few days after the hearing. No dramatic exit. No note. Just gone. She took what she could fit into a rental truck and left the rest for a mover to collect. Someone told me she was living in Portland now, staying with a cousin. The realtor canceled their agreement. Apparently, word had gotten around. Not just about the will, but about the way she handled it. Graham's friends stopped calling her back. Some even sent me cards, quietly offering their support. One of them wrote, "I never said it, but you were always more of a mother figure than she was ever a wife to him." I didn't know how to respond. So I just kept moving. Nora came by more often, always bringing something small, muffins, magazines, a bottle of wine. We'd sit on the front porch and talk about everything from heartburn to politics to which flowers could survive the Eugene frost. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Just sat together in the early evening light, watching the shadows shift across the lawn. It was Nora who encouraged me to build the little free library. We used reclaimed wood from the old shed and painted it the same shade of blue as Graham's childhood bedroom. We called it G's Corner. I hand-lettered a plaque beneath the glass door. Take a book, leave a memory. And they did. Kids came by on their bikes, parents in strollers. Someone even left a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird with a note tucked inside, for anyone who's ever stood up when it was easier to sit down. The library didn't fix everything. But it gave the house a new kind of rhythm. It gave me a reason to keep the porch light on. Some nights, I still talk to Graham. Not out loud, not really, but I feel him. When the wind moves through the maple tree. When the smell of his favorite chili drifts out of the slow cooker. When I sit at the piano and touch the keys without pressing them. I don't think I became braver. I think I just hit a kind of pain where staying silent felt worse than speaking up. That's all courage ever was for me, pain with nowhere else to go. And I don't hate Delia. I used to think she was cruel, but now I wonder if she was just scared. Scared of carrying someone else's grief. Scared of losing control. Maybe she thought love had to look like power to feel real. I'll never know. What I do know is this: she doesn't get to decide my story. Not anymore. One morning, while we were weeding the front garden, Nora wiped her hands on her jeans and looked at me. You ever think about selling this place? She asked. I paused, leaned on the shovel, and looked at the house. The chipped paint, the uneven shutters, the worn path from the porch to the sidewalk. Maybe one day, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Really? I smiled. Sure. But if I leave, it'll be because I chose to. Not because someone told me I should. That's the difference. That's the whole story. All right, my friend, if you've made it this far, thank you for sitting with me through all of it. I know it wasn't a light story, but it was mine. And maybe in some ways, it's yours too. You know, I used to think keeping quiet kept the peace. That if I was patient enough, polite enough, small enough, things would fall into place. But they didn't. Sometimes, people only see you when you finally stop apologizing for being there. Maybe you felt that way, like someone tried to write you out of your own story. And maybe, like me, you decided to pick up the pen again. If this story stirred something in you, even just a little, I hope you'll stay with me for the next one. There's more to tell. And I'd be honored to share it with you.